Good morning. Today is the 24th day of Kislev. Tonight is Chanukah. It's the 7th of December. What?
My grandmother's birthday.
We were waiting for that all year.
Rest in peace.
I mean, and her birthday? Okay.
She's about 125.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see now. So we said we explained a little bit about what Zah is yesterday, Zer Anpin, and and that the hair follicles are coming out of his mind, his intellect. Abba ve'ima. Abba ve'ima are mother and father, and they're like Chochma and Bina. So when we say that we have a Partzuf, a whole persona, so the whole persona is always made out of all 10 Sfirot, except there are a few exceptions. The idea of personas comes from the Arizal. They didn't talk about personas in the Zohar. They didn't talk about personas in...
Are you using an English or Hebrew word?
Persona is a Greek word. The word in Hebrew...
Persona is like the persona of a person. Is that what
right,
you're referring
right, same thing.
Okay.
It's the origin of the word Partzuf in Hebrew. Partzuf is not in Hebrew. It's a Hebraization of the word persona in Greek. So actually, when I explain it in English, when you say it in Hebrew, so Partzuf, the face, not exactly, but persona is the right word. Because persona, you already understand that it's a full gamut of something.
Yeah, right.
So the whole idea was that the Arizal, when he read the Zohar, he realized that you can't understand it in one dimension. You have to divide it up in certain ways, so that every time that it mentions one of the Sfirot, right? The 10 Sfirot are ancient. That's from the Bible already, from Chronicles. And we have a description of David HaMelech, of King David, saying the names of the Sfirot. So they're very, very ancient. But then the Zohar uses this language of Sfirot and other languages that were developed in order to talk about mystical concepts, spiritual concepts, let's call them. And then the Zohar uses that language. The problem is that when you read the Zohar, you see that it contradicts itself in many places. Here it says Bina is like this, there it says Bina is like that. And so the Arizal, as he was reading through it, he read very carefully. We have today his journal. We actually have his actual journal from 1530 about how he went through the Zohar, how describing his whole process, and which is very uncommon, by the way, to have a document that tells us how somebody studied back then in 1530. That's like almost. So he went through it and he realized that you have to say that there's different binas, like for instance, or different chokhmas. There's different understanding, different wisdom, and then he began to form the concept of a partzuf, of a persona that has bina. So there had to be a higher meta arrangement of what the Zohar was talking about. And so he ended up building a whole system that in principle we always say it has 12 personas, 2 in the Keter, they're called Arich and Atik, and each one of them has a feminine side. And then we have Abba and Ima, which are Chochma and Bina. Abba and Ima are the mother and father and mother principles. We call them father and mother personas. And then we have Zah, who we've been talking about, Zer and Pin, the small countenance. And then we have Malchus or Nukva, which is another, but really it's the feminine side of Zah. So where do we get 2 more? We get them from Chochma and Bina being divided twice, just like the Keter. So the Keter is divided into two Partzufim. Chochma and Bina are divided into 2. The 2 others, we said Abba, Ima and Abba and Ima, father and mother. There's also Yisrael, Saba, Vetvuna. Okay? The elder Israel and Tvuna, which means like comprehension. And then you have Za and Itznuka. So that's all together. And obviously Yisrael, Saba, and Tvuna, each one has a feminine side. Altogether there's 12. So this is a meta arrangement of everything that the Zohar talks about. This was one of his major innovations. And the way he explained it was that you start from Sfirot, and then when a Sfirah develops fully, it becomes a persona, it becomes a Partzuf. And actually, the Sfirot themselves are also, he had to break them up. He said they're actually a meta concept already. And really it starts from points. And what are points? Points are really the values of the letters. So Aleph is 1 point, Bet is 2 points, and the most important things that have points, Nikudot, they're called Nikuda, so we call them Nikuda, Sfira, Partzuf. A point, a Sfira, and a Partzuf. The things that have the most important points are the Gematriot, the values of God's fillings, of the fillings of God's names. Obviously, the most important name is the Tetragrammaton, right? You know all this, right? So it's all old news. So we've talked about it. It's okay. We haven't talked about it. Maybe it's so organized or not organized, depending on how you find my explanation. So God's names, right? So we have the most important name is a 4-letter name, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Its gematria just by itself is 26, but if we write it in filling, so we have Yud Vav Daled Hey Aleph Vav Hey Aleph. That's equal to 45. Then we can do another filling. Yud Vav Daled Hey Hey Vav Hey Hey. That's 52. Then we can do another filling, which is Yud Vav Daled Hey Yud Vav Aleph Vav Hey Yud. That's equal to 63. And we can do Yud Vav Daled Hey Yud Vav Hey Yud. That's equal to 72. Okay. So we have these 4 major fillings. Altogether, there's 28 different possibilities, with 14 different values. But he chooses out of the 14 different values these 4. They're the most important. How does he know this? Long story. You have to have a real high meta-analysis of the Zohar to get this. He also got it from other sources. He also had Eliyahu Navi teaching him in a certain sense. But when we say Eliyahu Navi, we mean that he had experiences of tremendous success in his learning. Like suddenly understood things that normally you wouldn't be able to understand. Okay, so that's the personas here. So the persona here is Za. That's what we've been talking about, and he has an Abba and Ima. It's sort of mixing terminology together, because the Abba and Ima are themselves persona. So how does Za have a persona? So really, what he's saying is Za has Chochma and Bina, but in Kabbalah it's very common to mix the names together. So if you say Abba and Ima, it's the same thing as saying Chochma and Bina. You say father and mother, it's the same thing as saying wisdom and understanding. And from the context, you understand how to unpackage a statement like that. Okay? Now we're continuing. Hinei inyana talit shu'o makif leza hainu. So this we read yesterday, and we talked about the 6 days, and we said that the 6 days are how everything is created. Everything is created with 6 days. With 6 days. It doesn't say Bishash Temim in 6 days, but with 6 days. God created the heavens and the earth. So that's also true about Za. So those, during the 6 days, what he's saying is you're working on creating integrated light. You're revealing yourself in the world in a way that you integrate into the world. Think about the weekdays. The weekdays, what the person does is they express themselves, and their expression, be it in thought, speech, or action, whatever garment they use, they're becoming integrated into the world. For instance, if I say now words, and nobody in the world understands what I'm saying, because I use a language that nobody knows. I'm talking Esperanto. I actually know people who know Esperanto. So I'll speak in Esperanto, and nobody understands the language. So what I've done is I've expressed myself, but I haven't integrated into the world. But my purpose was to do that. That was my intent. I didn't do it too well, though. So during the whole week, we use our garments, thought, speech, and action, to integrate ourselves into the world. So speech is one way, so I can record this on the phone and so on, and it goes on. And that, on Shabbos, I don't. On Shabbat, I stop the garments. I don't use speech and action. So somebody would say, we do speak. We speak b'di'evid, you could say. After the fact, they decided it's too hard to ask people not to speak on Shabbos. So since the sages didn't want us to all be transgressing their pronouncements, so they decided in the end to let people talk. They wouldn't be prohibited. What does it mean, let people talk? You would only be able to talk during davening. You would say the prayers and anything that had to do with Torah. That was the original intent of what to do with Shabbos in terms of speech. In terms of thinking, So we're prohibited from thinking about something that will integrate into reality. That's what we call mechin mikodesh lechor, that we prepare from the holy to the profane. You can't have those thoughts. On Motzei Shabbos, when Shabbos comes out, I will drive here and here. Because you're planning something, you're planning an integration, you're planning how to express yourself in the world in a way that's integrated. On the other hand, if you think 1 + 1 = 2, that's okay. Because you're not doing anything, it's something that already exists. But to plan is already to use your garment of thought to integrate into reality. So on Shabbos, it's a makif. Shabbos is like, in a certain sense, you've gone up to the light that's not integrating. It's a encompassing light. So what is the encompassing light here? That we have 6 days, they're the integrated light, meaning revealing, expressing ourselves in a way that integrates with reality. That we do during the weekdays. And Shabbat is like the encompassing light. And so there, what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to receive me'ein olam haba, we say about Shabbat. That we're supposed to receive the benefit, the reward from everything that we did during the week. Some people don't feel that Shabbat is anything special. Because we said that in this world, it's very hard to get the encompassing light. But it is an opportunity, and especially, I think we talked about this, that Shalashidis, the mincha time, the afternoon of Shabbat, that's a time when you can, almost any person with the right atmosphere can feel the reward, some of the reward, something, and not just reward, but also some understanding of it, some grasping of it, not just in terms of the good atmosphere, but also if they learned during the week, they suddenly have thoughts that they didn't have all week long. There's suddenly stuff clicks, stuff falls into place. It's a very good time for this. So anyway, so that's the explanation here. ואף על פי שמקיף זהו מבחינת פנימי שבעליון, שנעשה מקיף לתחתון, והיינו ממה שנצטמצם כבר להיות מבחינת אור פנימי, מכל מקום, הנה שורש כל המקיפים אחד, הוא דהיינו מבחינת העיגול הגדול, לפני הקרא וחוט, שהוא הסובב האמיתי, והוא המאיר בכל המקיפים, גם אותם שמתעגלים מן הקו כידוע. So there's a lot of Kabbalah here. To make it short, what he's saying is, on Shabbat, or in the Talis, what you're getting, the type of encompassing light you're getting is related to what you've done in this world. It's not what God planned. It's something that has to do with your actions. But he gives you a very important principle, that this is true both in the integrated light, but more so in the encompassing light, in the encircling light. All the circles are the same. Right? Every single circle in the world is exactly the same. There's no difference between them. The only difference they have is the size of the radius. That's all. But every single circle you can ever draw, it's not like triangles. Triangles, you have an infinite variety. You know some things that are true will be true about all of them, like 180 degrees is some of their angles, and a few other things that you might be able to figure out in advanced trigonometry, but in principle they're all different. But circles are all exactly the same. Another thing that's always exactly the same are lines, or what we call, I think it's called a segment in mathematics. Any segment is exactly the same as any other segment. The only difference is the length. But they're all the same, exactly the same. The circles is even more complex than the segment in that respect, because it's two-dimensional. Segment is only one-dimensional. And here you have a figure that's 2 dimensions, and will always be the same. By the way, the same is true about a square, and the same is true about a hexagon, and a pentagon, and so on. They all have to be the same, because the only difference is the radius, you could say. So he says these 2 figures, they form the basis of all of the Arizal's thought. Everything in Rabbi Isaac Luria is built on segments and circles. The segment represents what we call integrated light, because it penetrates. The point of the segment is to give you a sense of penetration. The circle is meant to give you a sense of encircling light, of encompassing light. So he says, if you get any kind, if you're able to perceive any amount of encompassing light, on Shabbat for instance, anything, you've tasted from the greater circle. And he has this idea that the greater circle is the will of God that came even before the creation of the world. We have a name for it. It's discussed in length in Chasidut. He's not getting into it. He's just calling it Igula Gadol, the great circle. And again, this is not a place, it's not a space, it's not any of these things, it's a concept. The concept is that there is an encompassing light that encompasses everything, which itself is a little hard to understand. How could something encompass everything? But obviously, if we say that, now you understand why the encompassing light has to be from God's infinite aspect. Because if it's going to encompass everything, it somehow has to be not just the infinite, but also the finite. We don't have time to get into this, but if you think about it a little, you'll see that to say that there's a circle that encompasses everything requires two things, both that it be finite and infinite. And that's the true infinity. The true infinity is limitless. We use this word a lot of times when we're discussing this. Limitless means it can be both finite and infinite. It has to have both aspects. But again, the point here is that the moment you have any inkling of anything that is encompassing light, you have a inkling of the great circle, because they're all the same. They're all one inside the other. Okay, I hope this makes some sense. So what he's saying here is when you put the talis on, you're getting something, even if you just feel it. You just feel the feeling of the talis over you. You're doing the ituf. You're doing the, how do you say ituf in English? You're wrapping yourself. That wrap itself is already an inkling of what we mean by encompassing light, and with that you got an inkling of everything. So that's what you should have in mind when you put the talis on.
In your light, we see light.
Right, something like that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so we'll end here. It was actually very short, 15 minutes probably. And tomorrow.
Oh, what are we doing tomorrow?
You want after? What do you want tomorrow?
Good with me, whatever. Can I send you a message? If I go up north.